Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today we shall be discussing about the application of remote sensing and GIS in biodiversity studies. So far we have already studied the basic concept and mechanism of remote sensing, GIS and GPS. As you all know, remote sensing is the process of acquiring information about any object, area or phenomena without having any physical contact with that object, area or phenomena. We have also studied in the previous modules how the global positioning system, that is GPS, it helps us in finding out the latitude or longitude of any place on the surface of the earth. Also, we have studied the basic concept of GIS as to how GIS helps us in analysis of the data that is obtained by remote sensing or any other means. We have also studied the components and the data models that are used in GIS. So, in this module, we will see how geospatial technology can be used for studies pertaining to biodiversity besides the agricultural biodiversity, forest as well as grasslands. As you all know, India is a very rich country that is endowed with good amount of biodiversity, and we have hotspots of biodiversity in our country. So, the biological diversity or biodiversity as we call it has been defined by the Convention on Biological Diversity, popularly known as CBD, as the variability among living organisms from all sources including terrestrial, marine and other aquatic ecosystems and the ecological complexes of which they are a part. This includes the diversity within species, between species and of ecosystems. So, accordingly we have three types of diversity: the genetic diversity, the species diversity and the community diversity. Biodiversity can also be defined as the natural variety and variability within and among living organisms and the ecological complexes in which they occur naturally, as well as the ways of interaction among organisms and with that of physical environment. Further, it is a multidimensional concept that includes different components. For example, the genetic, the population, the species and the community levels, and each of them has structural, functional and compositional attributes. For example, the size of population, species composition and distribution of alleles. Due to the complex nature of biodiversity, it becomes very difficult to express and assess the biodiversity. It must be related to not only the variability of life forms, but also with the ecological complexes of which they are recognized as important constituents. As the rates of habitat loss and species destruction continue to mount, the need for conserving biodiversity has become increasingly vital. So, in order to design significant conservation strategies, the comprehensive information on species distribution as well as the information regarding changes in distribution with time is required. The conservation of biodiversity is an indispensable issue due to the increasing climate change and the anthropogenic factors. Various rich biodiversity zones are under serious threat and have been degrading at an alarming rate. Thus, it is very important to preserve these zones and their habitats at local, regional and national levels. So, in order to implement conservation schemes for the sake of biodiversity conservation, comprehensive information on the distribution of species on a temporal basis are required. Biodiversity conservation has been put to the highest priority through Convention on Biological Diversity. It is expressed at different levels: genetic, species and landscape level. Although biodiversity is generally considered at the species level, the comprehension at the landscape level has been given priority worldwide, as the interaction with the habitat is very well understood in the latter. Biological diversity is proximately associated with global environmental changes and global issues such as climate change, land use and land cover changes and sustainable development. During the past several decades, human beings have caused serious impacts on ecosystem. More rapidly, due to large scale industrialization, urbanization and other activities. As a result, such activities pose serious threat to the survival of biodiversity and their natural habitat. This loss is further amplified by the lack of awareness, ethics, knowledge of biodiversity, especially of those communities living in close relationship within the ecosystem. Therefore, it becomes very important to link biodiversity and human interaction with respect to use of natural resources in order to sustain and preserve the biodiversity. Now coming to geospatial technologies and a brief overview of these technologies. The first one is remote sensing. It means acquiring information about an object, area or phenomena without coming in direct contact with it. According to White, remote sensing includes all methods of obtaining pictures or other forms of electromagnetic records of Earth's surface from a distance and the treatment and processing of picture data. According to the United Nations 95th plenary meeting that was held on 3rd December 1986, remote sensing means sensing of Earth's Remote sensing means sensing of Earth's surface from space by making use of the properties of electromagnetic waves emitted, reflected or diffracted by the sensed objects for the purpose of land use, natural resource management and the protection of the environment. Geographical Information System is a computer-based information system which integrates a variety of qualities and characteristics to geographical location and helps in planning and decision making. In GIS system, the map information supplemented with additional information can be displayed and referenced using computers. It can provide spatial information with appropriate conventional statistics. Burrow defined GIS as a set of tools for collecting, storing, retrieving at will, transforming and displaying spatial data from the real world for a particular set of purpose. So now if we look at the role of remote sensing and GIS in biodiversity, as we all know, it is very difficult to acquire information regarding species distribution with respect to location and time simply on the basis of field assessment and monitoring. In recent times, remote sensing and biodiversity communities have established cordial relationship to share their ideas, problems and their solutions on a single platform. Such relationships have been appreciably strengthened with the advancement of satellite remote sensing technology in the past few decades. Consequently, the advancement has boosted the interdisciplinary research at local and regional scale with high temporal resolution to assess the changes in species distribution, loss of habitat and so on. So, assessing and predicting ecosystem response to global environmental climate change and subsequent consequences on humans are prime targets for scientific community. The management and conservation of wildlife and biodiversity requires a reliable and relevant data on species distribution, abundance, habitats and threats as well. So, reviewing the requirement for biodiversity information has been noticed and addressed by protected area managers, decision makers, scientists, researchers and others. Dealing with biodiversity information, database needs to be geographically based and it must be able to predict where new populations of endangered species with a limited known range might be expected, thus specifying potential hotspots. Therefore, remote sensing and GIS, that is modern day geospatial technology as we just mentioned, helps in collection of data or information for biodiversity conservation, management and planning. The conventional methods for data collection on biodiversity have been found to be costly and time consuming. Comparatively, Remote sensing and GIS are the most efficient and cost-effective ways for collection of information and subsequent management of natural resources. It offers a systematic, synoptic view at regular time intervals and has been considered quite useful. GIS can be used for monitoring biodiversity since it can accommodate large variety of spatial and attribute data. Embedded in a GIS, the information is used to target surveys and monitoring schemes. The data on species and habitat destruction from different dates allow monitoring of the location and the extent of the change. So, as you all know, over the last few years, there has been a revolution in the availability of information and in the development and application of tools for managing information. So, it can help in changing the very approach of wildlife management based on current information and is more of location oriented. Coupled with GIS, the remotely sensed data can generate information about soil, temperature, rainfall, topography, landscape history and other climatic conditions besides habitat and soil coverage, the factors on which the species distribution mainly depends. Further, relationships between remotely sensed or GIS data and species distribution patterns can be used to predict the distribution of single or a set of species over an area. Between remote sensing science and conservation biology, the potential for synergies has been highlighted and acknowledged in the past by practitioners, researchers and data providers to better understand how remote sensing based studies can be utilized in monitoring and conservation of biodiversity. For example, Turner and his co-workers proposed two types of remote sensing approaches. The first one is direct and the second one is indirect remote sensing approach. While the direct remote sensing approach refers to the direct observation of individual organisms, group of species or ecological communities from satellite sensors such as high spatial resolution and hyperspectral sensors. The indirect approaches are based on certain environmental parameters that are derived from remotely sensed data in the form of proxies. For instance, habitat parameters such as land cover, species composition and land use changes are regarded as a substitute for exact estimation of ranges and patterns of species and their richness. Remote sensing provides consistent data of Earth at various scales at all levels ranging from local to global. In addition to this, the remote sensing does not require much of labor and it also saves time when compared to the ground based observations. It covers a wide scale terrestrial, atmospheric and oceanographic data collection as well as the monitoring of environmental changes at global scale. Remote sensing plays a major role in monitoring changes in biodiversity and terrestrial, marine and freshwater ecosystems, where it provides repetitive images on regular periodic intervals that make it predominantly appropriate for monitoring. It facilitates a vast amount of information for understanding and monitoring biodiversity and its dynamics. The remote sensing monitors the changes in terrestrial ecosystem, including changes in the extent of ecosystem, the changes in the extent of forest, the health of ecosystem, for example, by monitoring the greenness of an ecosystem, though estimating the health can be a great challenge. Further, remote sensing provides a wide range of information that help in estimating the species distribution and in integration with models that estimate the overall biodiversity. The wildlife and biodiversity management has stressed the requirement of having updated spatial information for decision making and implementation of plans. According to the International Union of Conservation for Natural Resources, the main purpose of wildlife conservation is to maintain the maximum plant and animal diversity through genetic traits, ecological functions, and biogeochemical cycles, as well as to uphold the aesthetic values. Remote sensing techniques further play a vital role in wildlife and biodiversity management because of its exclusive characteristics of synoptic view, repetitive coverage, and uniformity. In forest management, remote sensing has a major role to play in revision and updating of working plan, wildlife management, forest fire control, conservation of soil and water, studies pertaining to land utilization, grazing management, mapping the social forestry sites, and for other important species of general afforestation programs. Now coming to an application of forest management, the first one is forestry conversion studies. With the population explosion and urbanization, you all know that the forest lands are being converted at a rapid rate to the cultivated or built up areas. This causes a serious damage to the forest biodiversity. The forest cover distribution and its change is a crucial issue so far as forest management is concerned. Also, to develop the methods for estimating and evaluating the extent of forest resource and its changes to support the policy makers. Also, management is important to develop the methods for estimating and evaluating the extent of forest resources and its changes so as to support the policy makers in taking a decision that may ensure and maintain the rich biodiversity of the forest resources. Monitoring of these changes in the forest cover has been quite important because of its significant impact on climate changes. So, these remote sensing techniques and GIS coupled with ground surveys can be reliable in providing information on spatial distribution of forest and the changes they might have undergone. With the rapid destruction of forests and encroachment, the use of multi-temporal satellite data using data analysis procedure provides us a means to generate the maps based on spatial changes by image differencing methods and logical operations. Such maps would help us in assessing the extent of conversion of forest land based on multi-temporal satellite data. This geospatial technology is also very useful in estimating the damages caused by forest fires, the event of forest fire occurring, or modeling the possibility of occurring of a forest fire based on the meteorological conditions such as wind, heat, and so on. As you all know, fire is one of the natural or a man-made disaster which causes damage to the forest biodiversity and the ecosystem worldwide, which ultimately have adverse effects on soil, forest, and humans. During the process of forest burning, the soil nutrients are reduced and the soil is left bare, thus making it more prone to soil and water erosion. Therefore, it is essential that to have precise and timely information of the total area burned, topography, the type of forest, etc., we have to rely on satellite data or aerial photographs. Further, it is very difficult to manage fires effectively without any information relating to the distribution and dynamics of forest fires. So, here comes the role of remote sensing and GIS as they can help us in detecting the burnt forest area and developing a spatial model to forecast and assess the forest fire and its subsequent impacts on forest biodiversity. Further, the use of multi-mission Indian remote sensing satellite data has been implemented to identify forest ground fire damaged areas. Previously, with the combined use of Indian remote sensing satellite 1A and 1B, and currently we are also using 1C and 1D satellite data. Now coming to the next application of wildlife management, the distribution of wildlife and protected areas are the prime focus of any wildlife management. So the geospatial technology can be very effective in analyzing, managing and visualizing the wildlife data. GIS enables the analysis and mapping of the distribution of wildlife, their movement, their pattern of habitat use, which can provide precious information for the development of wildlife management strategies. In recent times, the rapid technological improvements in GIS as well as in remote sensing techniques have significantly increased the accessibility and efficacy in ecological management and research. Now coming to the management of grasslands, they are the world's most wide-ranging terrestrial ecosystem and are considered as the major feed source for livestock. So GPS and other ground-based sensors have been recognized as valuable tools for grassland and herd management. With the availability of space-borne remote sensing data, it becomes possible to assess and monitor grassland ecosystems based on the data related to their status about biomass, productivity level, quality, phenological stage, species composition and change, the biophysical parameters and management characteristics such as degradation, intensity of grazing and so on. The next in this series is agricultural biodiversity. It is a broad term that consists of all the components of biodiversity related to food and agriculture and all components of biodiversity that constitute the agricultural ecosystems that are essential to sustain crucial functions of the agro ecosystem, its structure and processes. The term agrobioinformatics refers to the application of informatics, that is information system, for management, presentation, discovery, exploration and analysis of agriculture and related issues. Agrobioinformatics is a type of electronic documentation of biographical, taxonomical and ecological aspects related to agriculture. So, agrobioinformatics may consider a multidimensional database in which information is stored in digital form using remote sensing and GIS. Furthermore, spatial analysis significantly helps us to understand the agricultural biodiversity constraints. The combination of multispectral and multitemporal remote sensing data along with the local knowledge and simulation models has been effectively verified to identify and monitor a wide range of agriculturally related characteristics. The spatial variability in crops creates a need for precision agriculture. The identification of such spatial variability is possible through the use of geospatial technology, that means remotely sensed images of the crops, and GIS modeling approach. The spatial variability in crop yield can be assessed through remote sensing and other geospatial techniques. In recent times, aerial images have been broadly used for crop yield prediction before the harvest. The vegetation analysis and change detection in vegetation patterns are significant for management and monitoring of natural resources such as the analysis of crop vigor or its yield. spectral bands such as visible, red, green and blue band and near infrared regions of the electromagnetic spectrum have been used effectively to monitor the crop health, crop cover, soil moisture, crop yield and nitrogen stress. So, there are different spectral indices which are used to estimate the distribution of crops, crop yield or crop cover. Some of these indices are the normalized difference vegetation index, popularly called as NDVI, which is based on the red and near infrared spectral bands. The green vegetation index GVI, based on the green and near infrared wavelength bands. The third one is soil adjusted vegetation index SAVI, based on the red and near infrared bands. The next is perpendicular vegetation index, that is based on red and near infrared spectral bands. So, at the end of this module, I hope the students would have got an idea about the biological diversity, its basic concept, what does it signify, and the types of biodiversity that I said is species level, genetic or community level diversity. We would have also got an overview of the types of geospatial technology, that is remote sensing, GIS and GPS, and how these are used for conservation and management of biodiversity. We have also studied how this technology is helpful in monitoring and management of wildlife, forests, grasslands and agrobiodiversity. So, I hope you all have benefited from this module. Thank you.